have a big language learning goal for your 2000hours.com. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about language goals. And I want to just let you know a little bit about my 2018 big language learning goal, and that was to read 450 pages. Now, I want to just take you back to 2018. That is when I had not even read one Spanish book at the beginning of 2018. And I was thinking to myself, as I did the calculations, that I could actually read 450 pages. And I thought that was a really big deal, and it really was. Now, I had started reading El Camino a Cristo. Actually, I started reading El Camino a Cristo in the summer of 2017, but I was just pretty lazy. But I was getting more into reading that book, and I talked about that already on my podcast, on my YouTube channel, and I did 2 videos about how I read my first Spanish book, and you can go ahead and look at those videos and listen to them. But I decided to think about things and go higher than I had gone in the times past, because again, I had never read a book in Spanish all the way through before. And I was able, and I'm thankful to say, I was able to complete my goal of reading 450 pages. And not only was I able to complete that, but I was able to exceed that by a lot. I finished reading El Camino a Cristo in April of 2018. And then I decided in almost the end of the year that I didn't just want to read 450 pages, but I wanted to read 6 Spanish books. Maybe it was in half of the year or something like that in 2018. And I was getting down to the end of 2018, and I still had not read 6 books. And I wanted to do that before I went to a youth conference in Houston. I think that youth conference started, if I remember correctly, on December 28th. And I was hoping to finish my 6th book by December 28th, because I knew that the conference was going to be very busy and I wouldn't really have that much time to read. I was not able, unfortunately, to finish my 6th book at that time. So I still managed to find time. I got up earlier so that I could finish this book, because I was thinking in my mind, I am not going to go into 2019 and not read 6 books. And I remember just getting up early, trying not to disturb my roommate or whatever in the hotel. And I got up early so that I could finish reading the book. And I was able to do that probably about, I don't know, like 3 days before 2018 ended. And to me, that's very significant, because I want to challenge myself. I don't want to be in the same position or the same area that I was in when I started the year. And so I also look at this year in the same way. I want to backtrack real quick. I want to say that one of the books I read was Hechos de los Apóstoles, I believe. Acts of the Apostles in English. And I believe that book is at least 300 pages long. So I was able to do that by God's grace and finishing my goal. And this year, my goal is to read 12 books. So that's a lot bigger than the goal that I had in 2018 of reading 450 pages or reading 6 books. And I know it's a challenge to do that, but I want to do that because I want to continue to go higher than I did last year. And the first book I am reading, and I've already started to read, is Hogar Cristiano. This book is over 500 pages long. So, when I think about 2018, the funny thing about El Camino a Cristo is, I remember when I first was thinking about that book, I was wondering, can I actually read that book? And that book was 100 pages long. And now I am trying to read one book out of 12 books this year, and one of them is 500 pages long. And so at this point, I'm a little bit, I guess, a little slacking. I've only read about 100 pages or so. and I am using Link, and that's what I used last year as well, for some of the books, not all of the books, but I am using Link so that I can read faster. And I will leave a description in this video of Link, and I will be talking about that more as we go on at First Thousand Hours. This is a referral link. It does help me out a little bit, but at the same time, I believe that it's helpful because it helps me understand things more as I read. And so I believe it's a really good tool for you as well if you want to try it out. Another book that I'm looking forward to reading that I've not even read in English, Oh God Cristiano, I've read that in English, but the other book I'm looking forward to reading is Depression, The Way Out in Spanish. This is not going to be done with Link. I'm going to actually buy a book, and it's a paperback, or actually it'll be a hardcover book, and I will be reading that. I don't know how many pages that book is. It probably is at least 200 or 300 pages long. And then another book I am looking forward to reading in Spanish. I don't know what the Spanish title is, but I read this book in English. It's called The Desire of Ages. It's a book about Christ, the life of Christ. It has been a blessing to me as I've read it in English, and I want to read the whole book in Spanish. And so it's a challenge. It's not easy. I'm going to be, again, far exceeding 450 pages if I really complete these goals. But language learning is not about staying in a comfort zone. And I think too often we stay in comfort zones. And because of that, we don't really get to the levels of where we want to be in our language learning marathon. And so I want to encourage you and inspire you not to give up on your language learning marathon for real. Now, one thing that I like to do that I've done basically since 2017, and I will talk more about this on a future podcast, is I like to read a book called Christ Object Lessons, and specifically, not the whole book, but specifically a chapter in that book called The Talents. And there's a section in that book called Mental Culture and also Time. And both of those sections have really challenged me and inspired me to come up higher in my intellect, and also in the way that I use my time. Because if we use our time correctly and wisely, we can accomplish far more than we think we can. And I believe we can do that by God's grace. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that podcast with you in the future. I will have to say right now, honestly, my laptop is under the weather or whatever. I've tried to fix that and it's not working. I really wanted to share with you a podcast where you won't really be seeing me on the screen, but my computer's not working. But hey, I'm going to keep on moving. And so I've decided to do this YouTube live for you as well right now. And I might be just doing some YouTube lives for a while until I go back to really editing things on my computer. Now, why do I say we should do big goals? Why don't I just say, for us to accomplish small goals this year? I know in the language learning community, sometimes I think it's encouraged for us to just do small goals. And I think one of the reasons why we encourage people to just do small goals is because we don't want people to fail in trying to be too ambitious. But in my opinion, I think it's better to be very ambitious. And if you don't exactly get to your goal that you had, at least you will be further along than if you were not ambitious at all. And I think that when you really understand the time it actually takes to learn a language, which I will be explaining as well in a future podcast, then you will know that you do need to put a good level of intensity in this language learning marathon. It's not something that you can just do in a small way and expect to get the results of someone that has the proper intensity necessary to accomplish what they want in language learning. Okay, so I looked at some people that were talking about goals for 2019, and some people said something like, I want to learn Spanish. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking in my mind, wanting to learn Spanish is not a language learning goal. And you might disagree with me. And please, if you disagree with me, leave a comment in the description. I would like to have a discussion with you. But I think that when we say I want to learn a language as a goal, it's very ambitious. It's not specific. It's not measurable, and it's not attainable because it's ambiguous. You can't define it. And so when you come down to the end of the year and then you look at your progress and you might ask yourself, did I actually learn Spanish? And if you can't really measure it, then you can't really quantify, and it's not going to be very helpful. And if you don't know what your goal is, then basically you can have other people that might define your language learning goal for you. For example, a lot of people like to go to Duolingo, and I have liked Duolingo. Duolingo has had and always will have a special place in my heart because that gave me the kickstart that I needed to believe that I was actually going to be serious with Spanish. So I'm very thankful for Duolingo. But sometimes in our, because we might not define what language learning, our language learning goal is, then we might get wrapped into trying to actually be a master of Duolingo or apps like that, instead of being a master of the language. And so a practical example is we can get caught up in trying to get a streak on Duolingo, and we spend our time and our effort in that, and we don't really put effort into using the language in a practical way, like especially reading and listening to things in our target language. And I emphasize that because I'm a believer in the input hypothesis, and I believe that when we develop those passive skills, namely reading and listening, then that prepares us for the other active skills like speaking and writing. Now, I'm not saying that you should never speak or write, but I think that when we put more emphasis on understanding the language or understanding, in context of reading and listening, then we will be better prepared when we speak. Okay, and I've shared that I've gone in real world situations, like I've gone to a Spanish church and I've interacted with people there. I've had a language learning partner, and actually I got to meet my language learning partner recently, and that was pretty cool. But anyway, I've had a language learning partner, and we've done a language exchange, and I'm an advocate of that. But I also believe that we should be creating language learning environments and using the language in a practical way that is not even necessarily dependent on a specific person. And I'm looking forward to sharing more about that in the future. But a goal should not, if we have those ambiguous goals, then we can, again, just be turning into a master of an app. And then when it comes to the end of 2019, we still might not have a practical use of the language. For instance, we might be afraid still of trying to read a book. We might be still afraid of watching a YouTube video in our target language. But if we have cultivated, and utilize our time this year in grabbing the time that we have and putting ourselves and creating that the environment in our target language, then we should be further ahead than we are today in how we are able to practically use the language. Okay, and so I talked a little bit about the big goals. What I've learned about big goals as well from last year especially is that it's good to have few goals. And what I mean by few goals is maybe one or two goals than having 10 goals for New Year's. It's nice to have an outline, maybe 10 goals for New Year's, but then what happens is we have all these big plans to do, and then when it comes to the end of the year, we're not able to really maybe talk about how we actually accomplish those goals because they might have been too much for us to do in a 1 year time period. And so what I've learned from my language and motivational partner, Connie, observed from her, is that she has one big goal that she has at one time. And I'm really excited when I will be able, or I'm really looking forward to when I will be able to share with you a two-part podcast about her and her language learning journey of Portuguese, because it's awesome. I mean, I've learned a lot about her because she is a very serious language learner. But having, because she had one big goal, she was able to focus on Portuguese and actually have a lot more focus than one person would have if they spent all this time diverted in 10 different directions. And with focus, I believe, comes proficiency in what you're trying to do. And so that's why I said we can have big goals, but we should analyze our goals and look at, okay, is this really going to be doable or practical in this year? Or maybe should I cut down my goals so that I can actually learn a language? And like I said before, basically, or implied, a big goal should be specific, measurable, attainable, and it should include hard work. And that's another reason why I believe that if we say, my goal is I want to learn Spanish, or my goal is I want to learn Chinese or another language like that, if we're just talking about that and we're not thinking about that in terms of the hard work, then what we have basically done is we have been able to share a wish with ourselves or maybe with other people. But a goal includes hard work. And that's why I have this title for First 1,000 Hours as First 1,000 Hours, because I wanted to help us to cultivate a conversation of language learning around a specific goal. And I believe that if we can get up to our first 1,000 hours, then we're able to really start to experience what it means to be a serious language learner. And that brings me to another point where I think that it's really good also to start this year thinking about a big goal, because even if we are a beginner in the language, even if we've never even attempted to start learning a language, if we approach language learning with a goal, then I think we're coming into this year with an advanced mentality. And I think that's very important. And that's one of the goals that I have actually for First 1,000 Hours, is to help motivate and inspire us and help us to have that mentality of a serious language learner. And like I said, there's things I really want to share with you in the future, not only from my perspective, but the perspective of others, that will help us know what does serious language learning look like. So I had these points that I wanted to talk to you about, and I hope that this has been a blessing for you and will help you as you are looking and thinking about your language learning goal for this year. And I would actually like to know, what is your language learning goal? What are you seeking to do this year? How are you seeking to even go further in your language learning experience than you have gone in the past? Please leave me a comment below in the comments. And I want to let you know again, my name is Franklin, and this is first1000hours.com.